It's got a sweet
So we're
voice.
going to talk about shamanism and indigenous medicine, and of course we could do complete course series on either one of those. A little quick review. The slide set grows and grows and grows. No matter how I edit it, it just keeps getting longer. So we went through just some general history of medicine and the way medicine works. And I'd like to emphasize once again, he who has the power tries to drive everything out that it's not orthodox medicine, no matter what it is, no matter how and what it may be like.
What's the modern equivalent of the last one there on that first slide? The balance of the black phlegm and the yellow phlegm and all of that. What's the
The humors,
vial? Pardon me?
the humors.
The humors. Yeah. What's the modern equivalent of that?
Um,
The balance part. I mean, how would you describe that?
it's not a part of Western medicine.
Okay. So that part is not part of Western medicine.
No, no, that's considered primitive unless you were in the 1800s. So we talked about the tyranny of orthodoxy. We're going to talk more about that. So allopathic medicine, which is what I'm licensed in, is the opposite of homeopathy. The term was coined by Hahnemann, who is the father of homeopathy. Homeopathy means the same. And so in homeopathy, it's the law of the similars. So things that like cures like. In allopathic medicine, we give you stuff to try to drive out all your symptoms, no matter what it does to you. So, and then we talked about energy and consciousness. And this is a basic fundamental in metaphysics. And that is, does anything really exist without consciousness? Had a very interesting interview with a shaman, a curandero, this week. And this is a basic concept in metaphysics, no matter what cultural orientation you have. Things exist because of your consciousness. And we talked about this idea of unity, and this is Schrodinger, and he said that there's only one life. He said there's only one mind. This is the source of all things. And I always try to throw a couple slides in here that remind us there's a one and only one. There's only one and one source. Only one and only one source. Schrodinger was a physicist. He was not a metaphysician. And we talked about conservation of energy and mass and matter and things like that. And my statement is that when we're looking outward, what we're seeing is a consequence and a reflection of our distortion or perversion of the perfect source. If we wouldn't need to come up with all these ideas about what's going on if we actually saw the perfect source the way it is. And so as a result of us not seeing it perfectly, we end up with all these different modalities, and they look like different things. They look like energy work, chi, field of consciousness, aura, laying on of hands. They look like things that like that, but they also can look like, well, that didn't work. The rest of the slide is not there. But anyway, it can look like the things that we do more like in Western medicine or in herbalism, like herbal medicine. So the modalities may have things that, if you got this, you get that. If you have this illness, then you get this herb. You got this acting crazy, you get this antipsychotic. Those are all just modalities, ways of approaching departures from perfect health. And then this concept of curing versus healing is very key. Curing, the ultimate end of curing is
death.
Death. All curing ends in death. As its ultimate. And all healing ends up with eternal life.
Life, yeah.
Yeah. All is energy, all is Brahman, all is Buddha mind. Or for Schrodinger, say there's only one mind. And then we talked about placebo, and how powerful the placebo is. Once again, I've left out huge numbers of slides, obviously. But if you give somebody an antidepressant, large retrospective studies, looking at many different studies have shown that 35 to 40% of the effect of an antidepressant, a pill, is from the placebo effect. If you didn't have the placebo effect, why would you take that pill? It wouldn't help you very much. So the placebo
And
effect is very powerful.
in this situation, the placebo effect is defined as that part of the pill that you're taking something to hopefully get a positive result.
Even if you don't know, though, the rat doesn't know. The little mouse here
Right.
doesn't know. He doesn't know he's getting morphine or
But
sugar water.
but if the intent of the practitioner, if the intent of
Exactly.
is to give someone to help them, then
Right.
30 to 40% of the efficacy of whatever it is that works is attributed to the placebo effect. If I understand what you're saying.
Exactly. Now there are different types of cooperativity. Some people take medicine just because you tell them to do it. In
Uh-huh.
reality, when you tell people to take medications, doctors think that the patients take the medicine. In reality, they don't take all the medicine. They take some of the medicine, but not all of it. That's why if you look in your little drug cabinet there, in your bathroom, what's lining the shelves in there? If you're like
Toothpaste,
most people, yeah,
toothpaste,
most people
shaving stuff.
have pill bottles lining their medicine cabinet. That's why they call it medicine cabinet. And so
Okay.
you go to the doctor and you get a 7-day course of antibiotics, and everybody has antibiotics left over at the end of the time. And
Can
that's
I tell you
because
one
yeah,
short
yeah, great.
anecdote? I had a client come to me for Reiki one time, young girl, first time she ever came, and she excused herself to go to the bathroom, and she took a long time. I said, "What is going on in there?" And I heard like a slam.
Yeah, yeah,
She was looking for drugs.
right.
I don't take drugs, so
Yeah,
she was very
that
disappointed,
didn't
I
work.
think.
That's not a very smart thief. You know, you,
Yeah.
you wouldn't go to a holistic practitioner, a natural healer, to find drugs. I mean, that's not. I think that's probably a sign of a low IQ. I
Mm,
think that's pretty funny though. That's a
yeah.
funny joke.
No, actually, she was quite bright, but I think that her path was going in a different direction.
Yeah, I think she needs to be a better criminal.
Dr. Turnage,
You probably
uh,
want to go to somebody who probably is going to more likely to have drugs.
about the placebo effect, what I find interesting is we're not talking about the consciousness or the intent of the patient. We're talking about the consciousness and the intent of the prescriber, the practitioner.
Actually, it's both, Stan. And there are studies to support this, but even without
So what?
studies,
So
it's both. When somebody comes to me because I'm a doctor, there's already a presumption of healing or
yeah,
curing, right?
sure.
And so there's an element of cooperativity in that, no matter what your modality is, whether it's laying on of hands, Reiki, surgery, chemotherapy. When the client or the patient comes to you, there is this expectation that's set up, and a relationship is formed. And the placebo is extremely highly affected by that relationship. In fact, it's probably the most important part of the relationship, but it's not all of it. Because even when you tell, this is why I put Ted's picture here. His research, a lot of his research is about placebos, and even in his studies and other studies, if you tell the person that it's a placebo, it still works. It still has an effect, even if you tell them it's a placebo.
If you don't tell them it's a placebo, is it more effective?
No, but it does have an effect because you have an agreement, you have a cooperative agreement to get better.
Mm.
So as a sidelight, one of the major things that I've learned over the last 10 years about psychotherapy, this would seem obvious, but I need to ask the client, do you want to get better?
You want to get the cooperation established.
Well, I want to know what's the goal here. Do you want to get better? Are you committed to this? Are you coming here for another reason? Because your wife said to, or your boss said to, or whatever.
Gotcha.
And then what would it look like if you got better? So this cooperativity is really, really important. You know, have an expectation of curing or healing. So that's placebo. Yep, there he is right there. No, even if you tell the patient it's a placebo, it often still works. Even if it's snake oil. The mechanisms of placebo are not well known, not well worked out, but we think some of it has to do with mirror neurons. This is a guy who's looking at a mirror reflection of his left leg, even though he has a very high above the knee amputation on the right. And it may help him decrease the amount of pain and uncomfortable sensations in his amputated leg, so-called phantom limb pain. And we talked about this too. If you see somebody, you don't even do nice things for other people. You just see somebody else do nice things for other people. Your serotonin and oxytocin levels go up. The serotonin makes you feel more happy. Oxytocin levels go up in love and relationships, in loving relationships. So even if you watch it, it goes up. Then I told the story of the totem. And in that story I told about giving the amoxicillin to the person from a local native tribe, it was once again a transfer of power. When people are telling me a story where they've lost their power, they believe they've lost their power, then my job in that situation is to remind them that they have the power. And so symbolism is often very important for that. And so I think writing a prescription is an important thing. For somebody who's having a problem like that, my belief in loss of power, I don't want to send an electronic prescription for them. I want to give them a piece of paper. Everything's electronic now. I just thought about this. I'll have to put this in the book. If you want to have a greater power with your prescribing, you want to give a token or a totem. You want to give something tangible to help symbolize the transfer of power. And then finally, we talked about spontaneous healing or spontaneous remission. I can call these ordinary miracles because spontaneous healing is the natural state of things. You were created to be well. You were not created to malfunction. The reason we're even here is because of the way we're created. So this form that we're in has been here for about 300,000 years. It's been pretty stable genetically for about 300,000 years. Our brain size, the parts of the brain. The other things that we describe as being modern humans, things like culture, music, art, language, technology, started about 50,000 to 65,000 years ago. So a relatively recent occurrence. But we were able to survive with all the things going on, with saber-toothed tigers and in a very hostile environment and very low levels of technology. We were able to survive all that. Well, how did we do that? Because you were meant to be well. You were meant to be healthy. You were not meant to be dysfunctional. And that includes every part of your life, not just your physical life. You were not meant to be unhappy. You were not meant to struggle. You were not meant to be a failure. You were meant to be a success.
And is there a lot of static going on?
I hear everything's silent for me.
I'm hearing all kinds of static. You're almost in between, interrupting your talk.
You're speaking. We can hear the static.
Yeah.
And you're moving around.
Huh. Yeah, I'm not hearing anything unusual. Let me unplug and plug my microphone in again. Did that help?
Yes.
Is that better?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Are you recording this? Maybe that has something to do with it.
I don't know. It's the first time I've done it, so I turned it on because Laura wanted a recording. So
that might be why you were hearing that.
It may be. I just plugged and unplugged the microphone, and maybe that healed it. I don't know. Is everybody good now?
You're fine.
You're fine.
Okay. Modern technology. So
yeah, you healed it. You healed it.
I healed it. I laid my hands on it. removed that evil plug from the jack and replugged it into the appropriate place, and it was healed. Praise the Lord. So you were created to be well. This is Homo sapiens, and this is us. If you saw this guy walking down the street with a haircut and a good suit, you would recognize him as another human being. Now, he might not have as good a tan because this guy's been out in the sun a lot, but he's genetically related to us. Very, very tiny differences between us and this guy in the picture. So what is that? Homeostasis. Things have a tendency to stay the same. The things that we do work. Our immune system works. Blood goes round and round. What are the rules of surgical pathology? Air goes in and out, blood goes round and round, and all bleeding stops. So
Okay.
So you were created to be well. The reason I show this, the first time I heard this in medical school, because I was so lucky. I got to go to medical school when I was 38, and all these things you've ever wanted to know, and people spend their whole lives telling you all this stuff in medical school. Now they tell it to you really fast. You do go through a lot of stuff in a very short period of time. But when I saw this DNA business, that we had 50,000 insults to our DNA every day. Each one of us has 50,000 insults to our DNA, and the body repairs them all. Virtually all of them. When they don't get repaired properly, repeatedly, the cells that come out of that are abnormal. And so your body will try to get rid of those cells through various mechanisms, like we talked about natural killer cell function. We'll try to get rid of them. If they stay around, though, they start growing and proliferating. We call that cancer. If those cells don't get repaired, that DNA doesn't get repaired, and they start making more abnormal cells, we call that a tumor or cancer. And yet we don't have that happen to us all the time. We have repair of our DNA, even though 50,000 times a day our DNA is being damaged. You were created to be well. And then I was talking to a couple of doctors about this week. Every single doctor you will ever talk to has at least, and usually many, stories about spontaneous remission. Every single one has a story. I don't care if they're a pediatrician, a dermatologist, a radiologist. The pathologists don't see a lot of spontaneous remission because they can see it, but if they're doing a lot of autopsies, they don't see a lot of spontaneous remission there. But if they're regular working pathologists and not forensic pathologists, every doctor has stories. And I asked 2 doctors this week, and they immediately told me a story.
So what's the kind of overall consensus, if there is one, of how that is the circle of support on that in the medical community? We
don't do that because it doesn't fit in the paradigm. It'd be like asking me to speak French.
So it's kind of like when you see an anomalous physical phenomena, something not health related, and you see 5 or 6 of them, and there's a million occurrences of normal stuff, and out of that there's 10, 15, 20 or something. It's just written off as, well, static or...
See, medicine is like the rest of science. It's actually a probabilistic profession. And everything's about probabilities. Even the doctors, you may have doctors that don't think they're consciously thinking about the probability of something, but that's actually what they're doing. They're using decision trees, and they're using probabilities of branching in those trees, and making probabilistic decisions. That's what we do. And there's a thing called expectation. If you make a wrong guess, what's the probability of that wrong guess times the cost of that event? That's called expectation. If that either number is very high, that's unacceptable. If the product of them have moderate elevations of probability of an event and the cost of the event multiplied together, that's very high. That's unacceptable. So then you have to spend more time and money and effort trying to lower those numbers down so you get a better outcome. but it's all probabilistic. So there's always going to be some statistical probability of anything,
Sure.
of any event. And so it's hard. You can't really pin people down on this because, number one, you're probably never going to find out why. I don't actually care why that lady did not have cancer from her liver spreading to her bone that I talked about last week, because it didn't exist. It may have existed when the radiologist was looking at it and the surgeon and all these people had this shared consciousness of that, but for the patient and me, it didn't exist.
Yeah. But wouldn't it be interesting if you could learn something for why it existed and then didn't exist? Like if there was some way to understand maybe a process or something that happened, it might be useful in other cases, or maybe not if that's just a one-off because of the body metabolism and the
yeah. I think I like the quantum approach to this. Like, as you said many times, Stan, when that wave function when that wave function is occurring, there are all these different probabilities of in that wave function, right? And you don't have a reality until the wave function collapses into a reality, and it can be an unlimited number. It's not infinite, but an unlimited number of measurable possibilities.
So the gal from Idaho, the cancer was diagnosed before the actual wave function for her life collapsed, and it was just noted a possibility or probability that may or may not happen. But when the wave function collapsed, and they went in and actually looked, that collapsed Schrodinger's cat was dead or alive. In this case, alive.
Right.
And so that's the answer.
Yeah, and also because for her reality, my reality doesn't exist. It may still exist in the radiologist's mind, or the GI doctor or the surgeon. It may still exist, but in our mind, in our consciousness, it doesn't exist.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is an interesting book. If you look up IONS, Institute of Noetic Science,
yeah,
you can get this book, this beautiful book with 3,500 studies in there about spontaneous remission. It's an old book. It's from 1993 and has not been updated, but that's a lot of information that's available to you online. So any questions about the things we've covered so far? We covered a lot of stuff.
Dr. Jim, this is Tom.
Yeah.
One thing seems that might not fit in the context of what you're saying is lifespan has changed over the centuries, hasn't it?
It has. It's interesting though. In the United States, it went down recently, so we're no longer.
We have a COVID intuition about what happened, right?
Yeah. So
explain.
Because we're not doing the things that we are necessary to prolong life, like some cultures are. Our life expectancy is going down. Now that's on average. You can still look at people that will be 100 plus, but overall it's going down, and we can reverse that by doing lots of things. And there's general health things that you can do to reverse that for the population. For yourself, important things like maintaining strong consciousness, spiritual practice, doing the physical things, but mind, body, spirit, and relationship, maintaining relationships. All those things are more likely to not only have a longer life, but a better life. But we're not really oriented toward that in the United States, in other countries as well sometimes. Things like, we're very technologically oriented. And the technology is not what's going to prolong life and improve life. What's going to improve life is living life in its fullest, which is mind, body, spirit, and relationships. That's what's going to make your life better and probably longer.
Example, better water, better air, no processed food, organic food, that type of thing. Being very, very pure in your methods.
Yeah, and waking up every day having an expectation of the wonder of life.
Mm-hmm. I've
getting
noticed,
every day, getting up going, wow, I'm grateful. Isn't this interesting?
I've noticed a number of programs out there that have highlighted uh, folks in Okinawa, folks in Sardinia, in an island belonging to Italy, and some other places where the people eat close to the ground. That is, the food they eat is being produced locally and it's not processed, but also their pace of life and their interconnection to the community is really strong. And I'm thinking of the Okinawan ladies, that a program I saw where they're all over 100 years old and they're involved in all kinds of community activities
Yeah.
and clubs. And there's even a group that of 80-year-olds that honors 100-year-olds, and they meet together. And I mean, it's and there's a joy. And as you said, Dr. Turnage, waking up with an expectation of something beautiful, something great happening, and breathing the air, talking to your neighbor, things like this. Just simple. I mean, the lifestyle is pretty.
Right.
I don't see a lot of computers, iPhones, uh, the Kardashians, or anything like this.
Well,
You know?
I have a patient's 100. This is anecdotal, obviously. She's 101 years old,
Uh-huh.
and she's a little bit slower than she was when I knew her 25 years ago. She actually changed careers. I believe she was 70, 70 years old, 65, 70 years old, and became an administrator for a college, and then had a whole other career as an administrator for that college. And then she retired, and she's going strong. But, she has a Facebook page, she sends out beautiful flower arrangements on the Facebook page and all sorts of wonderful, joyful things. So she doesn't tweet. She doesn't do Twitter, but she does Facebook. And she has lots of friends
Yeah, that's a
on
way
Facebook.
of socializing, and certainly,
And so she does technology. What I'm saying about the technology doesn't
Yeah.
have to be your enemy, but
You're
she
right.
doesn't use technology to go on there and yell at people. She
Yeah.
uses technology to go on there and express joy
Mhm.
and community and connection. And so they're right. Community and connection is very important. The expectation that we live in this wondrous, miraculous
You're
existence.
having trouble again, Dr. Jim.
Static.
You're having
Static.
trouble.
I don't know. I didn't change anything. Let's see. How about now?
You're
You
fine.
sound clear.
Okay. Don't know. Phase of the moon. Yeah. So anecdotally, and I had other patients that were 100, 99, 100 years old, and they all just had this wonder about them, and they were studying and reading all the time and
Yeah.
remaining interested all the time.
Curious mind.
There are studies that people that retire to nothing, you're probably not going to live very many years.
Yeah.
You'll probably live certainly fewer than 10 years if you retire to nothing. And so I always tell people, if you're going to retire, there's nothing wrong with retiring, but don't retire to nothing. Retire to something. Retire to something. And so this one patient I had didn't retire to nothing. She just got another career. She retired to another career. And now she is the joy of her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. So, yeah. So indigenous medicine, shamanism. The history of medicine is the history of indigenous medicine. What comes first? It's not technological medicine that comes first. The first thing that comes is indigenous medicine, and that eventually becomes co-opted and becomes the orthodoxy of the time. I don't care if you were the Greeks, I don't care what culture you're in, it becomes an orthodoxy. And it's kind of funny because I'm doing a lot of research about this so I get the background to put this in the next book, to summarize and put it in the next book. And you can see people regularizing curanderismo, to become curanderos and curanderas. These native healers from Mexico, Central America, and southern Europe. they're setting it up like an organization, and they're trying to regularize the training and all this kind of stuff. And it's wow, okay. So what's happening to it? This thing that came from the people, that's what indigenous means. It means coming from the people, becomes regularized and becomes an orthodoxy. But you know what? You can't stop people from believing what they believe. And so they maintain their indigenous beliefs. And even in a technological society, people still go to indigenous healers. So the cycle is indigenous medicine co-opted by and becomes an orthodox medicine, but meanwhile, indigenous medicine or medicine from the people continues all the time. So the indigenous medicine comes from the people, and then orthodox medicine, and then, well, I just said that, and indigenous medicine persists. So how old is caring for others to prevent and alleviate suffering and prolong life? What do you think? How long has that been going on?
Forever.
Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you in a minute exactly about how long we think it is.
Well, we're technological 65,000 years.
Yeah.
Probably sometime before that, because whenever humans started coming together in communities, however small, there would be someone that would be the most acknowledged as the person would treat the wound or knew what to do.
Yeah.
And midwife.
And even before that.
Yeah.
So this is a Neanderthal doctor. I can't believe I actually found this on the internet. But this is a Neanderthal dressed up in scrubs. And so how old is caring for others to prevent, alleviate suffering, prolong life? At least back to the Neanderthals. How do we know that? Well, we don't know for sure, obviously, because we have very limited biologic material from Neanderthals. However, we do have evidence of curing and healing and help and caring for others. When somebody got unable to get around with the group, they didn't just say, hey, you're out of here, and let them starve to death, because they found evidence of people that had healed wounds. And they could not have healed wounds if somebody didn't take care of them.
Even brain surgery.
They wouldn't have been able to go and get, food. They wouldn't be able to go and get shelter. And so they had bones that were healed. They had wounds that were obviously signs of infection and abscesses that they survived from that should have killed them. And they didn't, because people took care of them.
Yeah.
Or Neanderthals took care of them. Say again?
Can I say something?
Sure.
Yeah. Well, the first thing was they were hunters and gatherers, right? And as gatherers, they collected herbs, and they found out what the herbs were for. They found that there are many herbs, if not all of them, that actually help the body. And through trial and error, that's how they learned how to heal.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right. And remember, Neanderthals didn't have language. So they weren't writing this down and working this out and putting it in books. But the point of this is that they actually cared for each other. They always try to make Neanderthals out to be these brutish, people didn't care about beings that didn't care about anything, but they cared about each other. And and let's speculate why that's true.
The limbic system.
The limbic system, exactly.
Well, not only that, think about this. Even the most primitive human gives birth. So just in the birth activity, if you have a community, I mean, more than one person or two people, then that there's going to be some help given in the birth process, because I'm not a doctor, but it's not easy. And so I think out of the simple cycle of life and death and out of birth, certain skills would be developed. For example, a woman is bleeding, you need to stop the bleeding if there's things like this. And my guess is it probably goes back as far as we're cooperating in the birth cycle.
Probably so, Stan. But that's why this limbic system business and limbic resonance is so important, because it's a basic thing that mammals do. It's a basic survival mechanism for mammals. We care about little kittens that are running across the room, even if we are, Attila the Hun. You may go over and eat its head off, or you can eat the bat's head off or whatever. But we actually care about each other. Why? Because we're mammals. and we have a tendency to care for each other. And if you're in a group of people that are all related, you're probably going to care about each other more. It's a survival thing.
Sure.
So, a lot of stuff to cover. Here's the first prescription. It's on a terracotta tablet from Nippur, Iraq, in the 18th century before Christ, and it's a medical recipe for poisoning.
Oh, for poisoning.
Yeah.
Not for assassination, but for
No,
just
no,
healing?
but to help treat somebody who's poisoned.
Oh, to treat for poisoning.
Yeah. So
not to create a poison.
this is
The way it's written
speculated
there,
to be the first written prescription.
for an antidote. An
Yeah.
antidote for poisoning.
So medicine goes way, way back. So the first, obviously, the indigenous medicine was probably before Egypt, but Egypt is a very ancient culture. And the first named physician is Imhotep, who was an architect.
Right. The first Sakra pyramid.
Yeah, the step pyramid.
Yeah, step pyramid. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, but he also was apparently just a brilliant guy.
Yeah.
And he knew a lot about, there were 200 disease entities that he knew about. And we believe the first medical text, this is the first medical text. Now, this was not contemporaneous. This piece of paper, this piece of papyrus was not from papyrus. It's not original. It's copied.
Yeah, because that's back 2,400 years BC. Because even before that, maybe 2,600, Fourth Dynasty.
Exactly. And so this is the first medical textbook, and these are the ideas from Imhotep. So once again, we're going to regularize things, because even the World Health Organization realizes that we're probably not going to stamp out indigenous medicine. We're probably not going to be able to stamp that out. So instead of stamping out, they're going to recognize it. Why? Because it's important to people. So despite the rise of organized medicine, folk or indigenous medicine flourishes alongside. So the World Health Organization says the sum total, I'm sorry about this slide, it's so wordy, but I thought we would be like over 100 slides if I divided everything into smaller slides. The sum total of the knowledge, skills, and practices based on the theories, beliefs, and experiences indigenous to different cultures, whether explicable or not, used in the maintenance of health as well as the prevention, diagnosis, improvement, or treatment of physical and mental illness. So the WHO is recognizing this, and there's a lot of work going on to honor different forms of indigenous medicine and try to incorporate them so that people they're going to do it anyway. They're going to use indigenous medicine anyway. And some things may be harmful and some things may be helpful, but we want to make sure that if you're in the orthodox medicine group, that you recognize this, at least recognize this is occurring, and it's important to people. The common threads are holism in all forms of indigenous medicine and shamanism. And the individuals at the center, however, what do we notice about this? Individuals at the center, the human being, and their layers of individual responsibility and respect and wisdom. What's this out here?
Looks like community to me.
Exactly. It's the community, it's the culture. And in all forms of indigenous medicine, the community, the culture is important. Like if you're doing Chinese medicine, you have to know where the person's from, what's going on in the group, that they're from, the town they're from, or the community they're from. It's an interesting example. I'll just give a quick example. I had a Hmong, an HMONG, a Hmong patient who was quite sick in the hospital, and one of the members of their group, they were not all related, but they were all originally from the same town, same village, and so they have very tight relationships. And one of the members of that community was a young woman who was a social worker, and she asked me, I know you say, and the other doctors say that he needs a surgery, but we don't decide things like this. He doesn't just decide on his own, or his wife doesn't decide for him. We decide this as a group because it has to be in harmony. Has to be in harmony. And so in order to get, quote, informed consent, we had a community meeting to discuss this. And she, because I don't speak Hmong, she was the moderator for the meeting to come to a consensus, an agreement that would work for the community. Because the individual does not live in isolation from the community. The individual is an integral part, an absolutely necessary part to the whole. This is common in indigenous medicine.
You know, it's true in China too. If you look at Chinese names, take the president Xi Jinping. Actually, the Xi is the family name, and Ping is like his first name. It's like I would be George Stanley, because the individual is considered part of the clan, the family. And when that person succeeds or is a criminal, the whole clan is held responsible. And so even how you're referred to by your name, it's you would be Turnage Jimmy, and you would always be Turnage first, not individual Jimmy Turnage. And that's how Chinese
Yeah.
is.
And in this case, it was they weren't all related.
Yes, even more so. I mean, this idea of community
Right.
and the community responsibility for the person's responsibility within the community. This is something that is very different than how we view individuality and ourselves in the West. Very different.
Exactly, and it's really important. It's something that's really missing,
Yes.
from healthcare, in at least Orthodox healthcare. So holism is at the heart of all this. It's absolutely necessary. Okay, he said, it's always in the context of relationship with the whole, and in this case, the whole of the culture, the whole of the individual, all aspects of the individual. So what are the things that are other things that are important in holistic medicine and indigenous medicine? Typically plants, herbs, earth substances from the earth, mud, clays, rocks, artifacts from nature. Spiritual practices are uniform in indigenous medicine. And we mentioned community support, and the psychological aspects of illness are central.
Also place. In Celtic, you'd have ley lines, but a sense of place, of power spots and other spots that are more negative and draw energy or exude energy. So it's not just every place is equal. There's a sense of.
Yeah.
I mean, I would add that to the plants, herbs, earth, and literally the earth.
Yeah.
Location.
Location.
Even if you're out near a river, that helps too.
Yeah.
Or a mountain, high up on a mountain.
Sure.
Yes, you see that in things like people believe in the vortexes or vortices.
Sure.
Yeah. So there are the four sacred herbs in a lot of indigenous cultures, including Native Americans in the United States and in North America. Sweetgrass, tobacco, cedar, and sage are common. Tobacco is very, very important in Native American ritual. So I learned a very interesting thing yesterday in an interview. If someone comes to the healer and offers them tobacco before they talk to them about a problem, it's a serious problem. That's when you get an offering, because they don't pay, they don't exchange money for healing.
Mm-hmm.
And so but if you come and offer tobacco to a healer in North America, apparently that is, you're telling them that you have a serious problem that's going to require a lot of effort. And there are these relationships, depending on which healing system you're in, between the plants of the earth itself, fire, wind, these elements.
Water should be there too.
Yeah, water. Yeah.
Right, the four elements. I mean, this goes back to Greeks, the four elements.
Yeah, and before.
Yeah.
So we're going to talk a little bit about curanderismo.
Curanderismo.
Curanderismo, right?
Curanderismo.
So this is a curandero. Anybody recognize him? No. He was his name is Niño Fidencio.
Niño, little boy Fidencio.
Because he
the little.
They say in the readings that I've done about him that he never, quote, sexually matured. That he was always childlike throughout his whole life, even into death. And he learned from relatives about curanderismo, and he became a folk saint. He wasn't a saint like in the Catholic Church, but he became a folk saint. Curanderismo is a traditional native healing practice found in Latin America, United States, and Southern Europe. It's very, very, very common. I was talking about Michelle about this today as well. So it's not just in Mexico, but it's even in Southern Europe.
Don't forget the Caribbean.
The Caribbean, yes.
Any place where there, have been certainly Hispanic influence. Spanish
influence. Indigenous, not Spanish, indigenous.
Yeah, but the actual word curanderismo is like Spanish, though. So
that's a translation, yeah.
Yeah. But so here is a curandero. He's treating a little boy here. And he's using, what does he use? He uses plants. He's going to use plants. He's going to use prayer, and maybe special words. He may use other things.
Energy.
So dedicated. But these people who are curanderos, curanderas, male, female, dedicate their lives to doing this. They dedicate their lives to curing, healing of the mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual illnesses. Nothing is taken in isolation. You don't go to a curandero to get rid of your hangnail, because everything is connected. It's their mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual aspects are all taken together. Often the curandero will take on roles as like a psychologist or psychiatrist. And so why do you think this would occur? Why would this particular form of indigenous medicine occur and persist even though we have all this technological medicine?
Heart.
What's that?
Into heart.
Yeah.
People feel the love and the energy. It isn't just something cold to go away and get a pill. Or, how much time do you spend with your doctor? Not you, but what I've read is that a doctor is supposed to spend maybe 2 minutes with the patient. And I mean, it's that kind of personal connection, heart to heart connection, I think makes a huge difference. And we went back to this placebo effect and the effect of the intent of healing. Well, the intent here is...
so there is intent. You're right. The curanderos dedicate their lives to this. So a curandero told me that as best he could to avoid doing this, he had no choice. His grandmother, who had actually showed him the ways originally, told him, please don't do this. I don't want you to become a curandero. I don't want you to do this. Even though she continued to show him the ways. And he has tried to escape from it, and it's not possible. And one of the reasons is that he didn't pick it, his community picked him.
I don't think it's that simple. I think you're born into a lineage, and that's why the grandmother, probably the mother or an aunt, was
Yeah.
also a healer, and it was
Yeah.
passed down.
Yeah, and that's traditionally, you're right. It is passed down, but he could have said no. He
No,
could
I
have
don't
walked
think he
away.
could have.
That's what I
It
told him.
follows you. It follows you. I'm not a curandera, but that's how
Yeah.
I've seen it happen.
That's what I told him. I said, I think you have no choice. And he says, yeah, I'm in it now. I'm not getting out of it.
Well, it's who you are. I mean, in a sense, your DNA and everything. And some people have, we call it a flair for it, but that's probably too casual a word to use. But I've encountered people in life that were not licensed in a sense that you are, Dr. Turnage,
Mm-hmm.
but they had a mission of something and they couldn't avoid it. I ran into a guy in Sedona, Arizona about 20 years ago, and something similar to what happened with you and the Stephen Gilligan,
Mm-hmm.
that all of a sudden stuff started coming out. And he kind of laughed and said, that happens when I get around someone. It was an amazing experience. And it was just him, it was who he was.
Yeah.
And he didn't want any money. It wasn't any kind of a money issue or anything like this at all. It was.
I asked him if, because there are a couple of areas I want to talk about, and that's the idea, the methodology, and the theoretical orientation. But I wanted to know about the idea of calling, and that's why we had this nice discussion about he really had no choice, even though he tried not to. And I said, in the beginning, before you really had enough training, and people would come to you spontaneously, he said, yeah. Even though you didn't have all the training, yes. Did you know exactly what to do? He said, no. Did you know what was wrong? Yes. He knew something was wrong, or knew something he knew he kind of just knew intuitively. And I totally understand that. Because in my life, people would come up to me when I was a kid and ask me medical things.
Mm-hmm.
Which made no sense to me, because I thought these people were stupid. Why would an adult come up to a 9-year-old kid and ask him if this thing on their hand was okay? Well, but it was okay. It was fine. How did I know that? I don't know. I just did. So it comes from a place that is somewhat vocational, but it's not really a vocation. It's a calling.
I think in some societies, you're ostracized if you don't do or perform your calling, as you just said.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So I avoided it for a long time. And then it seemed like it was an unavoidable thing. Might as well go along. The modalities include, we said, things like herbs, waters, prayer, rituals, mud. And the ideal, once again, is healing in all domains: mind, body, spirit, and relationships. So this is the example, Niño Fidencio, who's a famous curandero in Mexico, who is considered by many believers not just a healer, but a folk saint. And his legacy continues. There's even a church that was established, what they call themselves, Fidencistas. And there's Niño Fidencio.
Year.
I think he died in 1938. Yeah. And so their whole lineage that follows after him, that studied with him. But still, they still go to the town of his origin, and there's a big mud puddle there, and they get miraculous healing going to the mud puddle, walking around the tree, prayers, and going to the mud puddle, and then curanderos there are available. So there are obviously indigenous healers all over the world. So I don't know if I've told this story before, but I had about 55-year-old Vietnamese male who came into the emergency room at Sharp Memorial Hospital with severe chest pain, and he had pressure. And this chest pain and pressure would only happen at night, never when he exercised or did heavy physical work as a mechanic. and he was very worried about it. So I admitted him to the hospital and did all the cardiac workup and the respiratory workup, and it was all normal, of course. He came in a total of 3 times for the same thing. After the second time he came in, I didn't see him for about a year, and then he came in a third time. I did all the medical evaluation again and found nothing. So what was wrong with him?
Well, something was going on in his mind, in his nervous system, because he was experiencing these symptoms that didn't seem to have a physical cause.
Yeah.
So something was happening.
So in the Western world, we would say, you know, he has some sort of anxiety disorder, right?
Yeah.
Except he'd been given antidepressants that did nothing. And so what he actually had, I looked it up because I became curious about this, because this happens in all cultures, and it's happened to people, you yourself or other people that you know. It's these night terrors when you're visited at night by a being or an entity that stands on your chest and gets on your chest and tries to crush you. And so in Vietnamese culture, it's called Made, or which is being held down by a ghost, or Bong De, which means being held down by a shadow. And when I said those words, even mispronouncing them as bad as I did, I tried to get a Vietnamese person to tell me how to pronounce it. I still did a bad job, but he recognized them immediately. And I said, "Is this what's happening to you?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "What did you do to get better from the second time you came in?" He said, "I flew to Vietnam and found a shaman there." Because the treatment for this in Vietnam is a shaman. That's the treatment for this. And so when he came in the third time, he couldn't afford to fly back to Vietnam. So my treatment for him was refer him to a shaman. That's the treatment for this.
You knew one?
I sent him to I hooked him up with a local cultural center for Vietnamese people, and they found him a shaman. So have you ever seen this before? Ever seen shamans, the Vietnamese shamans before? These things go on for hours. These rituals go on for hours. The communists banned this in Vietnam.
It's called Lin Dong.
Yeah, I'm not going to pronounce it, but this is a ritual. I don't know what she's doing a ritual for, but she's a shaman in Vietnam. This was banned by the communists, and now it's having a resurgence again. Why is it having a resurgence? Because that's what people do. You can't keep them from doing indigenous medicine. To become a shaman in Vietnam takes years and years and years to learn the rituals and to be able to invoke the right spirits and get rid of the spirits that are harming you. So I tell that story because the treatment for certain things is
Jesus. No.
is a healer.
Yeah.
And it's a healer that actually fits into the problem. You don't send somebody with a toe problem to a dermatologist. You don't send somebody who's having a heart attack to an orthopedic surgeon unless you want to die. You send somebody to the appropriate person. If you're a curandero and you're not really good with plants, but you're really great with rituals and dreams and sweat and all that stuff, you send somebody who specializes in plants. So I view Jesus as an indigenous healer. At the time of Jesus' life, he was not the only one doing miracles. There were all sorts of people running around doing miracles when he was doing his 100 documented miraculous healings. And I view him as an indigenous healer because, number one, he came from the people. He came from the culture. He used spiritual means primarily to help people. He did give moral advice, in other words, like psychological advice, which is different than spiritual advice. In other words, he gave, how do you live your life? What are the rules of being a good person? He did not utilize modalities other than physical modalities very much. In fact, he almost never touched anybody in the healings. There were many other healers at the time that were not in the same mold as Jesus, however. So here's the model for Jesus' healing work. He almost never did prayer and then some sort of ritual and then the healing occurred. He simply spoke it into existence. What does that sound like?
Sounds like, sounds like Course in Miracles. And so it is.
Yeah. So he goes in and goes, and this is a painting of Lazarus, who had been dead for 4 days, and he was already stinking and wrapped in clothes, and they had a stone in front of the tomb. And Jesus called Jesus and came and said, "Take the stone away." And what did he do? He said,
Get up.
"Get up." A loud voice, "Lazarus," because he's not dead. Even though everyone believed he was dead, he was not dead. He didn't do a miracle, to reverse the fact. He said, "This is not the fact. The fact is Lazarus lives." Here's another example. So usually the healing in Jesus' healing was immediate. But in the case of the centurion's servant, it took a little while. Why? Because that's what the centurion thought it would take. It would take some time. So he said, when you travel back there, he'll be healed. Go thy way, and as thou hast believed, so it be done unto thee. As it's done unto you as you believe. And his servant was healed in the selfsame hour. So Buddha supposedly also did some healing too, and performed miracles. Here's a nice tablet that's in the what's the museum up in Pasadena?
Oh, Getty?
I think
No,
Norton Simon. Yeah, Norton Simon Museum, and it's just this memorializes 8 miracles that Buddha did. In other words, it's things that happened in his life, that his birth, that he found enlightenment, the 8 miracles. So I'll talk a little bit about shamanism more some other time if you're interested. When I asked this person if I could interview him, I said I wanted to know a couple things. Number one, I want to know what I should call what he does. And he was almost going to back out of the interview completely over that, because it's considered not a good thing to say that you are a healer.
Even in Reiki, if somebody tells you I'm a healer, walk away.
Yeah. And so he had to actually check with his elders to make sure that he was being in good stead, that he was acting in an ethical, honest manner to do the interview and to discuss what he does and what it would be called. So I call them the nameless healers. You don't need a name for it. You just do it.
Causes me to think of the biblical scripture, I myself do nothing, the Father within, he doeth the work.
I think that's on a slide here, Stan. I think it's coming up.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to be...
So this resistance to naming or categorizing not only who they are, they're not an MD, they're not a healer, they were called, they were brought forth by their community to do the work. And so they do the work, and the work's important. What is not important is what they're called or what it is they're doing, what the name of what it is they're doing. Sorry about the picture. This is the best copy I could get. So this is in the Amazon. And this is a you know, a healer, a shaman, working with his apprentice. And so, as Emmy said, you know, this is often passed down lineages, but it, you know, bloodlines, but it may not. It's not a vocational choice; it's a calling. It's passed down from elder to apprentice in a continuous lineage, often familial spiritual inheritance. So this resistance to expression of ego in indigenous healers familiar. Here it is, Stan. I can of mine own self do nothing. The Father that dwelleth in me, he doeth the works. And we've talked about this before when I had that woman who called herself a healer and was working with it, had all that fever that wouldn't go away because she thought she was healing him, and she was not a clear vessel because her ego had clouded the vessel. And my metaphor is because she clouded the vessel by ego, that this heat, that was this energy that was passing through her, was causing her to physically be heated up. And when she quit doing that, the fevers went away. Because even though she was a secular Jew and really knew nothing about Christianity, I talked to her about this idea of that the Father does it. It's not us that do it. We're not doing anything. We're the witnesses of it, the facilitators of it. We're not doing it. It's not something we could do because it already exists and we're just there to facilitate it. It does require art and craft, however, because you have to learn how to do it. In general, you have to learn how to do it. Even if you have intuition about things, but you need some art and craft. So remember one thing for all healers, one and only one source. And that is another thread that goes through all the different types of healers, whether it's Reiki, being a shaman, being curandero, being a medical doctor. You know, if you think you're doing it, you're not. There is only one source. And what I'm going to advocate in this book that I'm writing is that if you want to be a healer, you don't have to go out and advertise it. But if you want to be even a doctor, you want to be whatever, we need to acknowledge where the source is, where all energy comes from, where all wisdom comes from, the one source, the one mind. So, questions?
It's a lot of material.
I made it through 77 slides.
Me.
Wow.
75 slides. So thanks for cooperating with that. That's
It's a great topic.
Cooperative. Thank
I
you
was-
for doing it.
You're welcome. This stuff is really, really important. That, you know, we can all be healers at some time in our lives. Somebody will come to you and you have just the right thing to offer them. You have just the perfect thing to offer them. It may
Even
be
if it's just a word.
a word.
Yeah.
And
That's
you
what
don't,
you told us.
and you don't even know why. Maybe you're saying the word. You know, so when I was standing in the elevator lobby at Sharp one time, and a woman comes up to me and goes, "Are you a preacher?" And I've got a stethoscope on, you know, and at a hospital. And I said, "What do you need?" And she says, "I need prayer." And I said, "Well, you shall have prayer." And right there, we did prayer. Now she needed to hear the prayer in a form that would fit with it, like an evangelical Christian, a mainline Christian. So I did that. Because, you know, if somebody speaks French, you're probably going to want to speak French. But people will just come to you, and you're the person. You're the right person for the job at that moment. And we have to remember that I myself do nothing. There's only one source, and we avail ourselves of that source, and you don't have to worry about it. The words will come to you. The right thing will come to you. You're in the right place. You were put there exactly, perfectly for that. So that's what I have for this week. Next week, we're going to start heart math and spirituality. The caveat always is heart math never advertises that heart math is a spiritual practice. It's a secular practice, but every person in that I've ever known that's worked extensively in heart math, whether they work for heart math, with heart math, uses heart math in their spiritual practice. So we're going to talk about the different tools of heart math, and for those of you who haven't seen them before, we'll go through them again and reinforce the tools of heart math, and then how I utilize heart math as an integral part of my own spiritual practice and how you can use it as well.
I start every meditation doing heart math.
Yeah.
I find it to be the shortest, quickest way to get to a neutral place where I'm centered and ready to listen and learn.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, the first thing I do if somebody comes in with anxiety disorder, I teach them heart math. I start off with the basic heart math of neutral, just the basic introductory. I've had people come in the office with a panic attack and they walk out okay. And what do? I have them lying down on their back doing heart math with their hand going up and down and the air going in and out, flowing in and out through their body and through their heart.
I'm finding it useful in dealing with Lil when she starts getting agitated and weird, combative, like argumentative, almost unintelligible sometimes, is I'll just start doing heart math, and then I'll talk to her real calmly and say, take a deep breath. And she'll look at me and the eyes will kind of open up, and I'll just like that. Yes, that's right. And before you know it, we're in a neutral place.
Yeah, so we talked about this before. Two things it triggers. Number one, we call this coherence. When you do heart math, your actual brain waves and your heart functions, the heartbeat and the rhythm of the heartbeat, become coherent, and they're actually mathematically coherent. If you put the waveforms on an oscilloscope, they look coherent, they look beautiful, and not all jagged and ugly looking. So number one, when you get coherence, if you're with somebody who's not coherent or incoherent, and this sort of perfect. She's incoherent. And if we did brainwaves on her, she would be all over the place. The person who's incoherent has a tendency to match the person who's coherent, not the other way around. And we believe that's because that's the lowest energy state. It's the most efficient energy state, is coherence. And because the amount of energy is not being wasted on all these just spikes of electrical activity in the heart and the brain. It's in a coherent fashion, so it's more useful. And the second thing is that limbic resonance. When you do heart math, you're enhancing limbic resonance, and the person can feel you. And when you're heart centered, when you're breathing, and you have these feelings of love, appreciation, and gratitude, unconditional love in your heart, people can feel that. They can feel that. And then they'll have a tendency to be able to calm down and go, everything's okay. All is well. So we're going to talk about heart math. I think it's an essential thing for people to know. It's been taught to little children. It's been used for so many things, like you want to get better scores on your LSATs to go to law school, do heart math. You want to have less ADD problems, do heart math. You want to feel less anxiety and depression, do heart math.
Yeah.
You want to not be so angry all the time, do heart math.
Dr. Jim, I have an announcement.
Oh, okay.
I'm moving.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Where are you going?
Arizona.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Where?
Sedona.
Really? Oh, there's a lot of energy there. There's a lot of change coming down the pike, I imagine.
Yeah, the reason I went in January is to see if that's the place for me, and I realized it was.
Oh, that's
wow.
Great. Yeah. So
Good for
I'll
you.
try to tune in, but I can't promise I will.
They have internet there.
They do.
I know, but the moving and the setting up is going to take me a couple of weeks to get myself organized.
We know about that.
I understand.
Yeah.
Try to log in if you can. Use your phone if nothing else, because this works on the phone.
Right.
I haven't done the class on the phone before.
So
From
Tony,
my-
so you arranged for a place and everything, so it's in process.
Say that again?
You've arranged for a place, you bought a place, you got a place, and it's in process now to move.
Oh, it's in process in the universe, but I don't have it yet.
Okay, you don't know exactly where you're going to land in Sedona.
I have no idea. I'm flying on my butt, you know, on this. But Spirit wants me to be there, and I'm going.
Sounds right.
When are you leaving?
My stuff, if I can get it all packed, is leaving next Wednesday, and
Oh,
I'm
bless
leaving
your
on
heart.
Friday.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's great. That's
And
wonderful.
you don't know where you don't know where you're sending it to in Sedona.
Don't know where I'm gonna stay that night when I get there yet, because everything's booked. I can't find anything. There's no Airbnbs available. Even the hotels, which are enormously expensive,
Yeah.
they're not even in Sedona. They're outside of Sedona. So
Right, Cottonwood or someplace like that, sure.
Yeah.
So
Well, congratulations.
wish me well.
It's already
All
done. It is
all the
done.
wishes.
It is done.
It's done, yeah. Wow.
All right.
I'll tune in when I can to let you know how I do.
Yeah, definitely tune in. So, anybody else have any announcements, dance steps, requests
Just
for the
if
requests
anybody
from
else-
the DJ?
Did anybody else have an opportunity to look at those?
Topics?
Yes. No, I'm being very negligent.
Yes, I'll keep reminding you every week. You know,
Well,
just keep sending me stuff.
There's a lot of it. If somebody knows that, maybe we could divide it up or something, because there's a lot of stuff in there. It takes a long time just to look at it.
Yeah, if just something strikes your fancy, what are there, 34 or something like that? 40?
There's more than that, and each of those, when you open it, there's 3 major ones, and inside there's more. And then you open those, and there's like the lecture they've taped it.
Yeah. Yeah. I would just look at the descriptions of each one, or if you know Sheldrake.
I
Yeah.
wish it was that there was a description, but that isn't what I see. When I open mine, it's the whole lecture or the whole presentation. Yeah, that's what I said. So it was like they were taping it for some future event.
Yeah, well, that may actually go away. All that stuff may go away soon. I forget how long I actually we get access to that. You're probably when you're logging in, you're probably going through my account.
Well, I'm logging in whichever way you gave me to log in. I'm done. I'm not going to spend any more time on it, but I gave you my things. So I worked on the first one. If somebody else wants to work on the second and third folders, you can. I mean, you could do whatever you want, but I'm just saying I'm done. I've done as much as I'm going to do.
Okay. Well, just if you guys can just take a look, like the different, if you recognize, Deepak Chopra, or, Sheldrake, or some of these other people.
Oh, Rupert Sheldrake. Yes.
People that you recognize and you want to have more information about that.
Morphic fields.
And it has a number for each one of the different ones up in the corner.
Yes, it does.
Yeah. I just need the number, like number 1, 19, and 43.
Well, I hope you could read what I sent you. I mean, I hope it meant something. I mean, that it was understandable. That's all.
Okay. I'll just keep reminding everybody. We'll try to pick some things to go through.
Well, at least
this was like this was a 5-day from like 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock at night conference. That's why there's so much stuff there.
There's a lot.
There's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, it was just time-wise that stopped me from doing any more, because it's definitely interesting, but they had a really interesting one on sound. And, but I sent you that already.
Yeah. So let's just take a look and see if anybody strikes your fancy, and then I'll take a look at that. We'll see what everybody wants to do. and we'll get a consensus, and we'll do those things, do 3 or 4 of those things. Okay.
Okay.
Well, that's it for tonight.